Did you know that the only reason the Lego brick exists is because people were complaining about the quality of the original ones? The automatic binding bricks just didn't stay together that well, which is not what Lego meant to do. But because of that mistake, they made the brick everyone knows and loves. This was obviously a very happy accident, but Legos made a bunch of mistakes that turned into something good later on. And today, I'm showing you 22 of them. Starting with something none of you probably know. The iconic minifigure smile isn't actually the original design. The earliest minifigures from 1978 had a smile that was technically geometrically imperfect compared to what we have today. Jens Nygaard Knudsen was rushing to get minifigures out as fast as possible because Lego wanted to be the first toy company with a space-themed product. And in all the commotion, the smile got messed up and had to be fixed with tiny updates over time. So the version we all know and love now wasn't even really planned. Lego just came up with it on a whim. But let me talk more about what I said in the intro. Before 1958, Lego bricks existed, but they were genuinely terrible at staying together. They were called automatic binding bricks, and the binding part barely worked. So customers in Germany started sending complaints to Lego, saying these bricks don't stick together. What's the point? And in January 1958, Godfred Christiansen sat down and made a new design specifically to fix this problem. He added tubes inside the bricks that connected to the studs on top, and that's what created the clutch power that actually holds bricks together so well. The entire stud and tube system that defines Lego was just a fix for angry customers. But when Lego picked yellow for the minifigure's skin color, they could have never imagined just how famous it would be. Lego made minifigures yellow because they didn't want them to represent any specific race, so they picked a color that represented nobody. But that neutral choice became one of the most defining, beloved, and debated things in toy history. The yellow minifigure is now iconic, precisely because it used that yellow color. Now, obviously, these were some pretty big decisions in Lego's career, but the story behind the headlight brick is the complete opposite. Back in 1979, designer Erling Diderichsen made part 4070, otherwise known as the headlight brick. And the only reason he made it was to put headlights on Lego cars. But what he didn't realize is that this piece was about to unlock a whole new building technique. That piece became the foundation of SNOT, studs not on top, probably the most important technique in advanced Lego building. This one piece was in over 2,380 sets, and when Erling sadly passed away in 2023, the community named it the Erling brick in his honor. But the craziest part about SNOT is that Lego didn't come up with it at all. AFOLs were the one who discovered it. They realized that because of the 5:2 ratio in Lego brick geometry, you could connect bricks sideways and make them align perfectly. 2 studs wide equals exactly 5 plates tall. So if you turn a brick on its side, the math works out and everything locks together. The community figured this out and ran with it, and now SNOT is a core technique in every single professional Lego build. But this isn't the only time something like this has happened. Another piece that got completely repurposed by fans is part 54200, better known as the cheese slope. Lego designed it as a simple piece meant for roofs and small decorations, but AFOLs turned it into one of the most used pieces in creative building. People use it as texture, as flooring, as teeth on creatures. It's pretty much been used for anything you can think of. And fans called it cheese because the yellow and orange versions look exactly like a wedge of cheddar. To acknowledge its newfound fame, Lego actually printed this piece with cheese patterns on it, which brought the whole thing full circle. But now, let me show you how a manufacturing defect became one of the most beloved character details in Lego history. The blue classic space minifigure helmets from the 1980s had a known flaw. The chin strap area was too thin and cracked really easily all the time. Lego never fixed this back in the day, so basically every kid who grew up in the 80s had faulty astronaut helmets. But when the Lego movie came out in 2014, they made Benny the Spaceman, and they gave him a deliberately cracked helmet as a tribute to this flaw. This was probably one of their biggest mistakes ever, but it gave us Benny, so I'm definitely not complaining. But this next accident pretty much proves that Jens Knudsen, the guy who made the headlight brick, is the king of happy accidents. He was the head designer of the space theme back in the day, and when he was trying to pick the main color for the theme, he didn't want to go with anything too boring. He wanted the sets to really pop on the shelves, so he went with blue because LEGO had a lot of pieces in this color, and making ones with new colors wasn't very easy. This was a very simple decision that he barely even had to think about, but because he picked the right one, space ended up becoming one of the biggest themes LEGO's ever made. But Classic Space also has a hidden story about how designers got around LEGO's rules. LEGO had a strict no weapons policy back then, which meant designers weren't allowed to put guns on spaceships at all. So Jens Knudsen and his colleague Niels Peterson just put radar dishes and sensor probes on ships that were very obviously guns. And they even admitted it decades later in interviews. It's like when they put adult jokes in kids' movies. To the kids, these pieces look like radar dishes and probes, but the adults definitely knew what was going on. These things were weapons. Alright, now let me show you how LEGO accidentally became the world's largest tire manufacturer without even trying. In April of 1962, LEGO started making miniature rubber tires for their sets based on vehicles. Nobody thought much of it, but by 2011, they had made 381 million tires in that year alone. That made them, by volume, the largest tire manufacturer on the entire planet. Bigger than Michelin, bigger than Bridgestone, bigger than every actual tire company. However, there's one LEGO accident in particular that's actually really tragic. But without it, LEGO may have never turned into what they are today. As a lot of you know, LEGO used to make wooden toys at the start of their journey, and as they were starting to make plastic toys, they were still making wooden ones. They didn't have any reason to stop making them, but on February 4th, 1960, the warehouse with all of their wooden toy inventory burned down. Most of the LEGO family wanted to rebuild it, but Godfred actually wanted the opposite. Instead, he wanted to bet on the future and only make plastic bricks from there on out. His brothers were absolutely furious with him, but Godfred did it anyway, and obviously this was definitely the right choice. The warehouse burning down was super tragic, but if it didn't happen, LEGO may have never evolved out of making wooden toys. But unfortunately, this isn't even the only tragic accident in LEGO's history. This next one is the story of a guy named Travis Kuntz and how AFOLs named a specific piece after him. Part 4733 is a 1x1 brick with a stud on every side. LEGO themselves never gave it a special name, but a lot of people in the community call it the Travis brick. Travis was an avid LEGO builder who loved building with this piece so much that he got a tattoo of it on his body. But unfortunately, he passed away in 2003. In honor of his memory, people started calling this piece the Travis brick, so if you ever hear someone call it that, now you know why. Moving on to something more positive though, the logo for the Creator Expert theme is actually dedicated to the people who came up with Snot. When AFOLs were first messing around with the headlight brick, they took 6 of them and turned them into a cube. It immediately became one of the most famous builds ever. You can still find it all over the internet today. And to honor this discovery, LEGO used it as the logo for the Creator Expert theme, which is very fitting for a discovery like this. But LEGO's own name also has an accident built into it. LEGO comes from the Danish phrase leg godt, which means play well, and obviously this was intentional. But later on, people found out that LEGO means I put together or I assemble in Latin, which just so happens to be a complete coincidence. The Christansens obviously did not speak Latin, so this really was a complete accident. But now, let me show you how LEGO almost rejected the sole thing that saved the company over 25 years ago. Before 1999, LEGO never had a singular licensed theme, so technically every theme was a LEGO branded theme. As we all know, LEGO Star Wars was released in 1999, but when it was proposed in a meeting, a senior board member reportedly said, "Over my dead body will you be launching Star Wars in Europe?" And that person is no longer at LEGO. Peter Ayo, who was the president of LEGO Americas, had to fight with the higher-ups just to get the theme approved, and Ole Kirk himself even joined him. LEGO finally signed with Lucasfilm in 1998 after 6 weeks of negotiation, and on the day the Phantom Menace premiered, 50,000 LEGO Star Wars sets sold in Toys R Us alone. That year, LEGO Star Wars did $130 million in US sales, which was about 10% of the company's revenue. LEGO was never even supposed to make the LEGO Star Wars theme, but it opened doors that they could have never even imagined. However, not every theme is as successful as LEGO Star Wars. Galidor from 2002 to 2003 is universally regarded as LEGO's worst theme ever. It played a big part in them almost going bankrupt, so it was a pretty big disaster. But there was something buried in that disaster that was genuinely useful. The rotation and click joint system that Galidor introduced was actually brilliant and worked really well. That joint technology got used for dinosaurs in Dino Attack, the Hungarian Horntail Dragon in Harry Potter, dragons in the Castle theme, and it's still used today in mechs for Ninjago. So even though Galidor itself was a failure, it had pretty good bones. Get it? Bones. Joints, bone. Yeah, you get it. Now, you've probably heard the term illegal building technique thrown around in the LEGO community. But here's the thing. That term was never official, like most people think it is. A designer named Jamie Berard used the word illegal in a 2006 presentation called Stressing the Elements. It was meant to describe techniques that LEGO employees couldn't use in official sets because they would damage pieces over time. The AFOL community saw this presentation and ran away with the term. But Berard has since said that it was never intended to be an official term. The only time LEGO as a company even addressed it is in a small article for LEGO Ideas, where they say that builders submitting sets can use any technique they want. But did you know that the minifigure itself was made to solve a really unique problem? Jens Knudsen's wife explained it very simply in an interview. She said the figure was created so that there would be life in the houses. At the time, LEGO's houses were empty, but then he drew this man. LEGO had been making buildings for years, but Knudsen thought they felt lifeless. He made 50 different prototypes across several years to solve this problem, and eventually he landed on the one that came out in 1978 and changed the world. So it's not like LEGO had some grand plan to make minifigures super popular. They just wanted to give some life to their sets. But now, let me tell you about a time when LEGO completely misunderstood their own product. When LEGO Mindstorms launched in 1998, it was marketed as an educational tool for kids in classrooms. That was the entire point. But company surveys a few months later determined that 70% of people buying LEGO Mindstorms were actually adults. LEGO had accidentally invented the first mainstream home robotics kit, which was a product category that didn't even exist before. But the origin of Mindstorms itself was also a complete accident. In the fall of 1984, Kjeld Christensen happened to be watching TV and saw an interview with an MIT professor named Seymour Papert. Papert was showing how kids could use programming to control robot turtles, and Kjeld was surprised by how similar it was to LEGO's philosophy of learning through play. So he started a whole new project, and it led to a partnership with MIT, the programmable brick, and eventually Mindstorms. The product that saved LEGO's status with adults only exists because the CEO was just chilling, watching TV. But the craziest thing about Mindstorms is that it almost got killed by LEGO's own lawyers before it even got off the ground. Hackers were able to reverse engineer the Mindstorms RCX brick, and they posted the code online. When this happened, LEGO's legal team considered sending cease and desist letters to shut it down, but the Mindstorms team argued that the hacker community embracing the product proved it was worth it to keep going. Hackers only do stuff like this when they really like what a company makes, and since they did it with Mindstorms, it was basically a green light to keep going. But did you know that LEGO accidentally made one of their most important themes by running a test they expected to fail? The LEGO Kuzu site launched as a small experiment in Japan in 2008, and LEGO didn't really expect anything to come of it. They were just throwing the idea at a wall and hoping it would stick. Between 2008 and 2011, only 2 ideas from Kuzu became official sets, but instead of dying, Kuzu exploded and turned into what is now LEGO Ideas, which is one of the most important themes in the entire company. Sets like the Saturn V rocket, the typewriter, the friend's apartment, all came from LEGO Ideas, and it all started with a test that they didn't even think would work. But which happy accident surprised you the most in this video? Be sure to let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.